In the heart of a dense forest, a lone teenage camper named Emily had set up her tent. She was an adventurous spirit, seeking solace in the wilderness, but little did she know that her peaceful campsite would soon take a terrifying turn. She sat by the campfire. The surrounding woods seemed eerily silent. The gentle rustling of leaves in the wind suddenly ceased, and an ominous hush fell over the forest. Emily felt a shiver crawl down her spine, but she brushed it off as mere nerves. However, as the evening deepened, Emily heard strange, indistinct whispers in the darkness. She strained to make out the words, but they were in a language she couldn't understand. Panic began to grip her as the unseen presence closed in around her. As the dark figure moved closer, Emily sat frozen to the ground, unable to scream. Twigs snapped, and the figure emerged into the firelight. "Hello," said a warm, friendly voice as the forest ranger came into clearer view. Emily let out a deep sigh of relief as she realized she had been holding her breath. The ranger approached closer. "Another new ranger?" she quipped. The ranger smiled proudly. "Yes, just a few weeks. Just finding my way around this glorious forest." "Good job, I have this walkie with me." He tapped the walkie. She smiled as she heard the strange mumbled voices from the walkie. "Old Tom has warned me about these woods." "Me and Tom have been friends for years," she smiled as the memories flooded back of the friendship they had formed over the years. "Oh, you're the young girl Tom told me about. Pleased to meet you," the ranger said, holding out a hand. "My name's Taylor, and I hope we can be friends too." "I hope so too," she gestured for him to sit with her and share a hot cup of coffee. "I love this forest," her eyes warmly looking about. "As long as you respect and look after this forest, we will be great friends." Taylor let out a small laugh. Tom mentioned the last few rangers had been frightened off by something that lurked in these woods. They didn't respect the woods. She struggled to hold back a snarl. "Yep, that's what Tom said. As long as I respect this forest, the forest will look after me." Emily could sense the warmth in his voice. "I love exploring, camping, and being one with nature," Taylor smiled. "Would you like to keep me company for a time?" Emily asked warmly, gesturing for Taylor to sit with her. "As I'm on my break, you can tell me all about this glorious forest," his tone full of wonder. "I'd love to tell you about this forest," Emily smiled warmly. They drank coffee and talked and laughed till Taylor finally said he must get back to work. "I will tell Tom I've met you." Taylor smiled. "Make sure that fire is safely put out," he said, disappearing back into the forest. Emily let out a bigger sigh of relief, swallowed down the last of the coffee in her tin cup, and decided to go to sleep and crawled into the tent, zipping the flap shut, slipped into her sleeping bag. As Emily drifted off to sleep, a sense of security washed over her, reassured she could sleep peacefully, knowing Taylor was looking after her beloved forest. The forest seemed to come alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, creating a soothing lullaby. But just as Emily was on the verge of deep slumber, she was jolted awake by an eerie sound echoing through the woods. It was a low, guttural growl, like nothing she had ever heard before. She lay still, her heart pounding in her chest. The forest had gone from a serene haven to a place filled with an inexplicable dread. Terrified, Emily reached for her flashlight, clutching it tightly as she listened intently for any more unusual sounds. The minutes dragged on, and she was certain she had imagined the growl when it happened again, this time closer. She unzipped her tent flap just slightly to shine the flashlight outside. The beam revealed nothing but the darkness and the rustling leaves. As her flashlight swept across the forest, she spotted a pair of glowing, malevolent eyes staring right back at her from the cover of the thick forest. Emily's heart raced, and her breath hitched. She knew this time it was no forest ranger, and her earlier relief turned into sheer terror. The mysterious figure remained in the shadows, its eyes locked onto her. Frozen with fear, she heard the sounds of leaves crunching. She fell back as a shadow moved across the tent.
Go away!
She screamed. A hand pressed into the side of the tent.
The ranger will be back soon!
Sinister laughing seemed to be all around. The tent shook. Emily screamed. Then she was consumed with outrage as she heard the sound of mocking laughter and watched through the slightly open flap as two teenagers ran laughing into the forest, joined by the third teenager from his position behind the trees. Outrage consumed her shaking body. Talons grew, replacing fingernails. Skin began to pulse and wrinkle. A deep guttural growl manifested into a roar. Her mouth now filled with sharp canine teeth. Emily emerged from the tent snarling and soon gained on the sounds of distant laughing. The three teens, 2 males, and 1 female, screamed in terror as Emily burst angrily into their makeshift campsite.
It's the evil skinwalker!
One of the boys shrilled out. The terrified teens stumbled over each other as they scrambled to get away from Emily, who now appeared like a creature from a nightmare. Her nails elongated into sharp talons, her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and her voice boomed like a vengeful spirit. Emily approached them with a menacing grace, her anger transformed into a primal force. The 2 boys and the girl desperately tried to run, but the forest seemed to conspire against them. Twisted branches reached out to trip them, thorns and roots seemed to claw at their fleeing figures. They glanced over their shoulders, catching a fleeting glimpse of Emily's transformation gaining smoothly on them. They were overwhelmed by a deep dread as they believed the legends of the malevolent skinwalker. Emily glided easily through the trees and bushes, which almost seemed to be helping her along. The young girl tripped, falling to the forest ground.
Please, don't hurt me!
She screamed out in a voice trembling with fear. But Emily's wrath had reached its peak. She wanted to teach them a lesson they would never forget. She let out a bone-chilling howl. The forest responded, sending ripples of terror through the teens. Taylor, having heard the commotion, arrived at the scene just in time to witness Tom standing firmly in front of Emily's fearsome transformation, allowing the teen pranksters time to flee. Emily. Tom's soothing voice seemed to calm Emily, who slowly resumed her human form. Tom, the old forest ranger who had befriended her over the years, caught her sinking body and talked calmly to her as he cradled her in his arms. I think those young pranksters have learned the consequences of their actions, Taylor said as he joined Tom and Emily. He smiled at Emily and quipped, "You left that part out." The 3 of them laughed as they walked back to Emily's campsite.
Told you she was a special young girl,
Tom said proudly. She is that, Taylor agreed. I think I'm going to be happy here. After a few months retired happy knowing that the forest was in safe hands as Taylor and Emily formed a strong bond over the years. The forest once again fell into a serene stillness, but the legend of the skinwalker would haunt the memories of those who dared to play with the supernatural or disrespect the forest.